I'm going to attempt to answer the question here that students often have. That question is, what student is their favorite? If a teacher even has a favorite. So what students are liked more is what I'm actually going to go after answering here. Who's liked more? So let's take a look at this and let's use me as an example. Every year that I've been teaching, I like all of my students equally. So in year one, I liked all of those students equally, 1/150th. But year two came along and I liked all of my students equally, but now I've been teaching for 2 years and I had 150 students per year. And the same for year three, year four, and now year five. So I have 1 times 3 150th, 1 times 4 150th, and 1 times 5 150th. Now we can neaten these fractions up just a little bit to where we can say this is still 1 150th, this is 1 300ths, 1 450th, 1 600th, and 1 750th. But that doesn't help us compare the amount of like that students get. So what we need to do is we need to look at this in terms where it's a common denominator. And the largest common denominator that I can reach, although it won't be pretty, is 750th. So this, when converted to a 750th, is 5 750ths. This is 2.5 750th. This is 1 1/3 750th. 1.25 750th. And 1 750th. So now we know how much like there has been to share each year that I've been teaching. But that's not necessarily how much like they had, because during year two, I didn't stop liking my students from year one. So that means that they received their 5 750th and 2.5 750th. And then in year three, an additional 1 1/3, in year four, in year five, and so on. What this means for me is that the total that they have received, that becomes the next question. How much have they actually received? So if we go through this whole combining, we wind up with some really nasty fractions. 133 over 12 750th. That's how much my year one students have received to this point of like. They're not liked more, they've just received more like. Year two gets 128 12 over 750. Year three is 112 over 12 750. Year four gets 97 over 12 750. And year five has 85 over 12 750. But somehow I don't think this is helping us compare how much like students have received. So we just divide it out. We're going to go ahead and say that 133 divided by 12 divided by 750 is approximately 0.01477, and that 7 is going to begin to repeat. So that's how much total like that they have received at this point. Year two gets 0.01422, and that 2 begins to repeat. Year three gets 0.01244, and then we hit a repeating 4. Year four gets 0.1077, and that 7 begins to repeat. And year five gets 0.00944, and the 4 repeats at this point. So we can see how much total like a student has received based on what year they're in. Which means in my 9th year of teaching, I will have 1 over 9 to the 150. And if that student from my 9th year comes back to me for another class 2 years later, they would receive 1 over 11 150th. And just by counting that, we can see how much total like they've received. So teachers don't necessarily like students more than others, But I think we can mathematically show that some students have received more like than other students, and it's just a time issue. They've been in the like pool longer. I just want to take the opportunity at the end to point out that this has all been for fun, to say that teachers have a favorite student. We don't. But I think it's interesting that we can use math to prove that maybe they do like someone more than they like another. And I also want to point out that we can notice that there's an arithmetic sequence or geometric sequence, that 1 over n to the 150th, when n is the number of years teaching. That's how we can figure out how much like there is in a given year. And then in order to figure out how much like they've had, you'd have to just sum up all of those years. I hope you've enjoyed,